Well, it finally happened. They did the dang thing. The Juan Soto era in San Diego is over, officially being traded to the evil empire New York Yankees. Reacting to the trade, some of the thoughts on what it means for the Padres going forward, if the return that they got was worth it, and a whole lot more. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Thursday, December 7th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. Follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, that's Javiipeno. Or if you want only Padres-related tweets, I got you covered at LO_Padres. And if you want to see my face, or if you want to see Pac-Man and Tatis, my buddies, then you go check out Locked On Padres on YouTube. Today is arguably the biggest episode we will have this offseason. Dare I say, I'm calling my shot on that one, as Juan Soto has officially been traded to the New York Yankees. It was first reported by Jon Morosi and later confirmed. I'm recording this right before midnight. It was later confirmed after some medical stuff reportedly of why it was holding it up and whatnot. And there we have it. He is officially a New York Yankee. First of all, crazy for the Yankees. They get to have him and Aaron Judge in the same lineup. That's insane and probably going to be a nightmare wagon for opposing pitchers to face. But in terms of the Padres, and you're listening to Locked On Padres, I ain't going to talk about the Yankees. Forget the Yankees. We hate them. They stink. For the Padres, here's my one-sentence summary. I am not happy, and I tweeted this out from the Padres account, but I'm not happy per se. I like the return they got. What I'm not happy about is the fact that they are in this position to begin with. I understand why they are currently in this situation in a vacuum, right? You have to cut some salary, and you already have a pretty high payroll, right? They're saying cut it to around, trim it to $200 million. That's still more than enough for you to be able to win a championship. My problem is how you got to the position where Juan Soto is the player where you had to make those cuts in order to save some money, right? And in a league that's filled with a bunch of owners that, don't spend a whole lot of money and keep it to themselves oftentimes and don't show out talent, the Padres have been the antithesis of that over the past bunch of years. And acquiring Juan Soto has been great for them. He was awesome last year, career high in home runs. He still had that 400 on base. Despite the fact that the Padres were historically unclutch, he was one of the players that was not. He was not unclutch. He was very, very good for the Padres in basically every single scenario. And now he's going to be great for the Yankees. He's a generational talent. He's compared to Ted Williams basically all the time, and it is warranted. 5.5 F4 last year, and it could get even better at just 25 years old. That's the crazy part. And to me, I never was buying into the whole, oh, well, it's only a year. How much could you possibly get back for a year? I think that was ridiculous because I think they're the Yankees and they're worth $7 billion, so they can extend and sign whoever they want. But for the Padres, that was what the issue was, and I'm going to miss him. Love watching the Soto shuffle. Thought it was fantastic. Thought it was just so much fun to watch him on this team with him and Tatis. It was supposed to be the team of dreams, and in fairness to Soto, did give us some good moments. While last year didn't go the best of us, I got to see him in person at Citi Field. It was great. It was electrifying. I love to see, he hit a home run that, banged off of the boardwalk, bridge thing, and it sounded like a gunshot went off. You know what I mean? It was absolutely nuts. And also, he was pretty okay for them and had some big hits in that playoff series against the Dodgers, who, of course, famously, they don't care about the Padres, though, guys. You know what I mean? They don't care about us. They just like talking about us nonstop, right? As many Dodgers media and fans will let you know. But the full trade, which I just realized now I haven't discussed, the full trade, and I'm reading from Jeff Passan, the Yankees are receiving not just Juan Soto, I forgot to mention this, but also Trent Grisham in the trade, while the Padres will be receiving right-handed pitchers Michael King, Drew Thorpe, Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, and Kyle Higashioka. Joel Sherman, as I mentioned, Jon Morosi was the first person to kind of report about this, and then Joel Sherman had the deal confirmed. So shouts to them. A lot of reporting going all over the place, frankly, with this thing, but it finally got done, reportedly being held up just a little bit because of medicals. In terms of the return, It's complicated because, again, I think viewing this, you have to view this deal in the prism of what their circumstances are. Of course, trading Soto for this stuff isn't necessarily worth it, but given that you kind of have to trade him, I think it's okay. The Padres get back some nice pitching returns in this, so I'm kind of cool with that. They get a backup catcher in Higashioka, and they bolster their farm system a little bit. And most importantly, they're saving money, and that money can be used elsewhere, whether it be on a Kevin Kiermaier to replace Grisham or anything like that, right? Or some other lower cost options that we may talk about tomorrow on tomorrow's show. So stay tuned for that. But just an absolutely nuts move. It really is. This is the type of thing, and if you told me a year and a half ago that this would be happening, I wouldn't quite believe it. But there's reasons why this has happened. It's because of the fact that they went out and they extended last offseason. They extended Manny Machado. They extended Yu Darvish. They extended Robert Suarez. They extended Jake Cronenworth. And Jake Cronenworth, by the way, who I talked about in yesterday's show, may also be on the move at some point. And they signed Xander Bogaerts to an 11-year deal. So here's the thing. Like I said, I like the return. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth in a second. I like the return. For what circumstance you were in, I'm just upset that we are here in the first place. The fact that some will argue, well, 2.5 years of Juan Soto, an elite player, like a top 5 player, is worth it for the haul that the Padres gave up. It could be. C.J. Abrams, Robert Hassel, Mackenzie Gore, James Wood. We don't know about James Wood yet. I've only heard the best of things. We'll see how he does maybe next year for the Nationals. C.J. Abrams is taking some time, but he's still a baby. He's still young, and he's shown some signs of getting better. Robert Hassel's a little bit not the same as he was viewed a couple years ago. Mackenzie Gore is at least like a starting caliber pitcher in Major League Baseball. We'll see if things change on that front over time, but he's still, kind of young, so he might turn it around. The Padres gave up a haul. Now, I'm not saying that those players are better than Juan Soto, but they gave up assets, and a lot of them, especially ones that were viewed very highly at the time, and still might be viewed very highly. For me, it's just that it shows a stunning lack of foresight on the Padres' part. That let's say, okay, let's say it's worth it. 2.5 years. We will have Soto for 2.5 years, but you're not getting him for those full 2.5 years, which shows you the lack of foresight, which makes you wonder, why did you do all of those moves? Bogaerts, I got no problem. I don't even have a problem with Suarez. I understand it. I think the Suarez contract was them saying, we think this guy is great, and we know we're losing Hader next year, so let's get a guy who's going to cost less as an elite closer. Now, he's been scaring us a little bit, but nevertheless, stick with me. I understand every move in a vacuum. The problem is, you were in a position where you had to trade Juan Soto. And if you meant to give up all of that stuff, even knowing you might not be able to reach an extension, well, you got him for 1.5 years. You know what I mean? So was all that just for 1.5 years of Juan Soto? Did you know that? Because I question that. And if that's the case, again, I just feel like your priorities weren't totally straight there. AJ Preller and company. I like the move they made. I think it actually shows some reflection and saying, you know what? Let's try and build a different way. Instead of just going for all the top marbles, you know what I mean? Instead of just going superstar hunting, they said, let's try and thin out the rest of the roster. And I'm okay with that. But I don't think that was the original plan. At least this might be just speculation. Might be a little bit of a more anecdotal. But it just feels like you make all those deals because you thought you might be able to keep Soto going forward, at least for this last year to make a push. And you didn't. Now he's a Yankee. Now he's a Bronx Bomber with the evil empire. And it does make me sick, but I do think that there's a lot of silver linings with this deal. And we're going to talk about that in just a second, guys. But first, let me take a second to talk to you about our friends from FanDuel. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your team wins. You want to make a little bit of a gamble over on the maybe the Jaguars and say, you know what? I don't care that Trevor Lawrence might not play this week. I bet you the line is actually going to be great, and the Jaguars are still a pretty good team. So I might look into them still. Maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to just bet against the Chargers because you hate them as San Diegans potentially. Go for it. Whatever you want. They also have you covered with all sorts of other things, from spreads to player props, individual player props, over-unders of scores, maybe some first team to score, first player to score touchdowns. I know a friend of mine loves doing that, and he's been right as of late with guys like Romeo Dobbs, I think it was, Christian Watson of the Packers. So if you want to do that, you can do that as well for games and a whole lot more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off your NFL season of betting. FanDuel, official betting partner of the NFL. And just like that, we're back, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Woo! All right, let's talk about the dang deal. So, the Padres got, I'm just going to reiterate, right-handed pitchers Michael King, Drew Thorpe, Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, and catcher Kyle Higashioka. Another thing that happened is that they moved off of Trent Grisham. Whether you view that as a positive or not, I think is a little bit more by personal opinion. I, for one, think that it was never going to really happen for Trent Grisham here, at least in terms of batting. He's still a Gold Glove center fielder, but if you look at his overall numbers since 2021, he hasn't been quite good at all when it comes to batting. He is the 5th worst weighted on base among all qualified outfielders. My bad. All qualified batters since 2021, right? This is a guy who looked like a fleece for the Padres once upon a time from the Brewers, thought that we got ourselves an on-base, stolen base, decent pop, 2020 guy for all you fantasy players out there. He turned out not to be that. Instead, he's more of a 4th outfielder. I think he's going to do okay in New York. Frankly, I think he could do better anywhere because he does hit the ball hard, just doesn't always make consistent contact. You know what I mean? He's a lot of dribblers and whatnot, and I've called him Joey Gallo without the same level of power before, and I think that's what Trent Grisham is. But now that means that center field is up for grabs, potentially. So what does that mean? We'll talk about that in a second, guys, but let's talk about the rest of the package. Michael King is probably the immediate player that will headline the deal in terms of what affects the 2024 team. A team that I still think, because of the contracts, whether they like it or not, even if they didn't want to compete, they will be competing and be in a win-now mode in 2024. And Michael King, while he's had some shoulder issues and some arm issues and some injury issues, what have you, I don't remember if it's a shoulder or whatnot, but he's been effective at points, right? On top of, obviously, the money that you're saving, Michael King has been actually pretty good. He's flashed signs of brilliance, honestly, over his last couple seasons with the Yankees. He's rocked a 2.60 ERA and a 30.6 strikeout rate across 155.2 innings, like I said, since 2022, the last couple seasons. That's pretty good. And he would immediately slot in, potentially, as the Padres' number 3. Do I love him as a number 3? No, but I don't think the Padres are done. But it gives them some depth, and I do like that. I like that you have a little bit better of an option instead of just kind of hoping that the Ruben Niebla magic can turn Matt Waldron and Pedro Avila into really quality starters, assuming you're losing Blake Snell, which I think they will. Whether or not they get or are able to retain or bring back Michael Wacha, shouts to Pac-Man, he might not be on this show, Waka Waka, for much longer, or Seth Lugo, remains to be seen, but I definitely think that they can find a way to get some pitchers like that. So you bring in Michael King, he's an upside guy. I don't know if he's going to be an amazing player. I really don't. But I'm optimistic based on just those numbers that I mentioned that he can be pretty dominant, at least at points. I just think that it would be a little bit better if the Padres get a little bit more, depth in that department. You got Darvish, you got Musgrove. Let's see if you can get some extra ammo, some extra pot shots for that starting pitching rotation, because it still will be a potential question. But also, like I said, there's more pitchers involved. Drew Thorpe, Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, and catcher Kyle Higashioka will be the backup for Luis Campusano. Quickly on Higashioka. Sorry for jumping around. It's just really revved up right now. Crazy that this happened so late at night. Higashioka, serviceable backup catcher. I think the definition of a very serviceable backup catcher. At times against good pitchers, he can hit for decent power for sure. As someone who lives on the East Coast, he does have a little bit of a clutch factor to him. Don't get me wrong, his numbers aren't insane. They're not going to freak you out or anything like that, but he's not terrible. 1.7 F4 last year, and if that's your backup catcher, not too bad. Again, 86 WRC plus isn't great. I know that a lot of people might have preferred if the Padres were to bring back Gary Sanchez, but I bet you that they said, you know what, this guy's probably going to get a little bit too much. They're riding with Luis Campusano, and they're saying, this guy will be our dude. He's going to be our starting catcher, but we'll have Higashioka as well as a backup who is a little bit more of an experienced player, who's a little bit more better of a defensive player, not a little bit, a much better defensive player. And, Campusano's got to work on some things when it comes to his catching, defensively at least. So having Higashioka behind the plate, I think is a really good number 2. And I think quietly, the Padres could be really, really solid, or at the very minimum, better than what they've had in years from the catching position. I do genuinely believe that. That might sound like a bold prediction, but I believe it. Johnny Brito and the rest of those guys, not incredible or anything like that, but they're serviceable starters. Maybe one of them ends up being moved to the bullpen, depending on what the Padres do going forward. But if you want to just look at their recent numbers, Johnny Brito was rocking a 4.28 ERA last season, while Vandy Vasquez was a 4.98 ERA last season. So not the best in the world, certainly, but they've at least proven that they can get outs and be serviceable. You don't want to be desperately dipping into your farm system. We all love Robbie Snelling. We all love Dylan Lesko. We love those guys. Those are the top pitching prospects currently for the Padres, and I think are viewed a lot favorably than people might realize, I think, in some circles as pitching prospects. But now, because of this move, gives you a little bit of extra ammo, a little bit more space that you don't have to rush them. Because again, this is a team that's probably primed to win now. So you don't have to be like, you know what, we got to bring up Snelling. One of the things that we keep seeing from the Padres these past few years is that they have a lack of depth, so they are forced to call up their prospects early, right? You saw them do that with Luis Campusano a few years back, where he's debuting against Kenley Jansen as a pinch hitter, right? Not literally debuting, but you get my point. That's a tough position to be put in, especially for a guy who hadn't even hit much above Double-A yet, right? Or previous years when they had to start Vincent Velasquez and Jake Arrieta down the stretch, or a couple years ago when they had to bring up CJ Abrams, even though they had Ha-Seong Kim because of the Tatis situation. So they won't be forced to bring up guys, right? I think that's what's so exciting about this, is it gives you some room for Snelling and for Lesko. I'm not saying that those guys won't be ready. Who knows? We'll have to see how spring training shakes out. But I just like this in terms of some depth. And considering you had to trade him as well, I think you got a decent haul here. The other side of this is Trent Grisham. And I think that this is the most interesting and the spicy part of this whole thing. Like I said, I think he could do well for the Yankees, but now you got some questions with the outfield. No Soto, no Grisham in center. All you know that for sure that you got is Fernando Tatis Jr. Does Tatis move to center field? Does he move to left field? I don't know. Personally, and this might sound crazy to some, I'd rather keep him in right field, the position and the place where he won a platinum glove. The first time a non-Nolan Arenado player had won the platinum glove in what feels like the last 70 years, right? I would rather probably keep him in the place that he's already shown that he's excellent. Don't get me wrong. They can move him to center. Maybe he's capable of that too, but I kind of like keeping him where he's already shown that he can be excellent. So shouts to Tatis, seriously, shouts to him. But I'm wondering now, what does this mean for the team going forward? What does this mean for free agency plans? I'm not totally sure. I'm not totally sure because this leaves some gaps in the outfield. But with their farm being bolstered a little bit, forgot to mention Drew Thorpe, who has been ranked as a top 100 prospect and was the number 1 pitching prospect still left for the Yankees. I think that's another piece that's very good, and it bolsters the Padres farm system into being one of the best. I write for JustBaseball.com. They have him as their number 78 overall prospect among the top 100. I like that too. But now back to my point. Again, sorry for jumping all over the place. It's been a crazy night, and I'm getting texts from a lot of people literally over the course of recording this. But the last question is, with Grisham gone, with Soto gone, 2/3 of your outfield is gone. So what the heck is going to happen next? Guys, AJ Preller's a lot of things. He didn't make this move and go, oh God, now I got to find a center fielder and left fielder. There's some plans. And we're going to talk about those in just 1 second, guys. But first, a few words from our sponsors. And ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We are rocking it. We are killing it here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen every day. Free and available on all platforms. You can follow me on Twitter, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Last thing we got to talk about. With the absence of Trent Grisham and Juan Soto, what does this mean going forward? Well, it means that the Padres are going to get some outfielders. And there's a bunch of different areas where they can improve in. I think that there are some people might throw out Kevin Kiermaier as a potential center fielder, right? Sure, that could work. He's been a defensive wizard for years. You could slot him in at center field, but it's kind of an obvious one, isn't it? There's a lot of teams that are probably going to be looking for that. We'll have to see. But The other thing is, I talked about the Padres farm system. Does this mean that the Padres are a little bit bullish on Mr. Jackson Merrill? If you might remember, last year, I believe it was like was it June, July, that it was reported that the Padres, or maybe it was reported in August, I think, that it was reported that the Padres might have considered calling up number one overall prospect for their team, Jackson Merrill, a top 10 prospect amongst most baseball prognosticators and prospect analysts in the entire game. They were considering calling him up and putting him in center field, which I thought, and looking back, looks like I was right about that, might have spelled how they feel about Trent Grisham right now, which is that they just don't think it's happening here. He's just too much of a minus as a batter, and I think that, again, I really do think that he could be good for the Yankees and good for another team, but it just wasn't happening here. I mean, this is a guy who bunted with no outs and the bases loaded against the Dodgers at one point, right? Like, he clearly didn't have a lot of confidence in his bat. It remains to be seen whether he can improve in that regard, but Jackson Merrill, I think, was another example of why it showed you the Padres probably were ready to move on from Trent Grisham. And I also have talked about a lot on this podcast that if you just look at a lot of teams, they usually have like a dynamic center fielder or just at least a couple of outfielders who can do a lot of things. And Grisham just hadn't been up there. And it's kind of crazy that for a team that had made as many moves as the Padres had, like basically swapping out everybody, right? Getting a bunch of different shortstops and then going to get Soto and then bringing in Tommy Pham and bringing in Brandon Drury and Josh Bell, like Jake Cronenworth to first base, Xander Bogaerts, all this stuff that you'd think that they would have tried with the one player that we've seen for an extended, prorated amount of time was not getting it done at the plate. But that was the one position that we're like, oh, let's give it a second. It's just funny to me. And Jackson Merrill was another example of that. This will be one of the top stories to follow as spring training gets around, seeing whether the Padres want to call him up. As of right now, it's probably Jose Azocar will be their starting center fielder, which I don't think is something that they plan on making permanent, right? Like, I don't think that this is some type of situation where they believe Jose Azocar is some diamond in the rough, but that's kind of what the roster looks like, right? Or Jacob Marcy is another one. He's in Double-A, but that also still leaves left field, right? So there's a lot of questions there. And I don't think anyone like Machado or Kim or Bogarts or Cronenworth are going to be moving into the outfield, obviously, right? So Jackson Merrill, could he be the starting center fielder for the Padres next year based on all the reasons I just outlined? Maybe. We're going to have to see. I hope that if he is, it's because they're really confident that he can at least be Trent Grisham, right? Except he's under control and he has higher upside and he's younger, right? Can he at least be that? Maybe. Or he can be a left fielder. Maybe. We'll have to see. But the bigger thing here is, and I think this is the most exciting thing, did the episode a couple of days ago, Jung Ho Lee, KBO prospect, superstar phenom there, basically since he was like 18. I've talked about him a lot. This is a guy that with 2 strikes, he makes zone contact percentage is through the roof. He is a slap hitter. He is a guy that's going to put the ball in play. And for a Padres team that oftentimes I wish just had put the ball in play, and dare I say even just gotten some productive outs, Jung Ho Lee could be a good player there. He also had 28 outfield assists since the beginning of the 2021 campaign. He's done very, very good there. So could this be a sign that they're ready to make that deal? Jung Ho Lee isn't going to cost as much as Juan Soto. So are they making some room, salary-wise, to potentially go after him? It has already been rumored, according to John Heyman, that the Padres are one of the teams targeting him. I think in terms of the top free agents, Cody Bellinger ain't happening. Shohei Ohtani, it ain't happening. You know what I'm saying? Those guys aren't happening. But in terms of like top-level free agents, I do think that Jung Ho Lee is capable. I do. Well, it would have been fun if the Padres were able to get some other outfielder who is at least ready now that you could plug in. The Yankees don't seem to be a team that really had that necessarily. Like, you could argue that maybe Spencer Jones, their top outfield prospect, could you try to get him from the deal too? But, that's not necessarily what you need right now, right? So that's a little bit of an unfortunate, what's it called? Reality of this trade. But I also think that there's plenty of other guys on the market that could make sense. Do you want to go out there, like I said with Kevin Kiermaier? You want to get Tommy Pham again? I'm kidding. But that would be fun, right? Or is Jerkson Profar, Mr. Vibes King, that guy probably ain't going to cost that much. And he seems to just really love it in San Diego. He gets along with Tatis well. Could he be a utility player instead that you move left field? Maybe he's infield sometimes. He was left field before when the Padres were in the NLCS. You know what I'm saying? Until they got Soto, obviously. But like, you know, he's been with the team before, so I could totally see that. And not to mention that they might be shedding some more salary with Jake Cronenworth, reportedly a player they're trying to trade to. I don't know if that report is this is definitely going to happen type of report, or if it's like an Eric Hosmer report where it was like the Padres are looking to get off of Eric Hosmer. It's like, yeah, no crap, right? But nobody's going to take this guy. Unlike Hosmer, though, I think that there's some teams that might be interested, but I don't know. I think you might have to attach something to it. So we'll see how that shakes out. But if they're able to save more money and whatnot, Jung-Ho Lee, can he be a guy you bring to center field or whatever position he's most comfortable with and whatever works up with Jackson Merrill? A starting outfield consisting of those four guys, of a Merrill, Tatis, Jung-Ho Lee, right? That could be pretty interesting. I don't think that that's the worst situation in the world to be. It's not as exciting as Soto, right? Obviously. But it at least gives you a little bit of, there's some intriguing upside there. Especially if Tatis returns to his form as an MVP caliber bat. Padres are in business, man. Like, seriously, they are in business if that happens. And then it's not too bad to bet on big bounce back seasons for Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts. I mean, we have no other choice. But you have that. You have the star power. So going for a Jung-Ho Lee, going for Jackson Merrill potentially being the starting left fielder or center fielder for the team, I think could be quite good. Whether or not they bring in someone else remains to be seen. I don't think it'll be a top-level player. The top-level free agent that I think they have the best chance at getting is Jung-Ho Lee. And like I said, contact-oriented player, really fast, and also just has had a lot of winning experience and whatnot. And I just kind of like that for a team that, like I said, lacked productive outs, God forbid, he might just be a guy that puts the ball in play really consistently, being a pest at the top of the lineup. Maybe you figure out some, do some mix and matching with him and Ha-Seong Kim. Ha-Seong Kim really improved as a leadoff hitter this past year, seeing more pitches, getting more walks, not swinging as many bad pitches, pulling the ball more to the left field porch and Petco, right? So that could be really great. Jung-Ho Lee, Tatis, I'm just saying, guys, I think that is the dream. And I think getting rid of Grisham, it's reportedly also, by the way, that there isn't going to be too much salary relief in regards to all this. Like, the Yankees aren't kicking, they're giving them salary relief, obviously, by them not being on the books anymore, but they're not kicking in extra cash, is what I should say, in this deal. It was a little bit unfortunate, but alas, that's where we are. I just think that the report says the Padres are interested in Jung-Ho Lee. I am highly doubtful that this is AJ Preller's last move. I don't think that he's going to allow the team to have Jose Azocar and who did I mention before? Jose Azocar and Jacob Marcy as a starting center field and left fielder. I just don't see that. I don't see it whatsoever. So do they move off some other players? Potentially. Save some more money? Maybe. But either way, I like Michael King. I like the deal that they got. I trust that AJ Preller was able to get the best possible deal. A lot of people were saying Toronto. I don't think Toronto really had the type of players that matched up with what the Padres were looking for. And what the Padres were looking for was starting pitching / bullpen depth. Maybe they can go out now and spend a little bit on the bullpen. We'll have to see. You already saw them make that move with Scott Barlow, whose numbers are occasionally a little bit comparable over the past couple years to Enyel De Los Santos, who I think that Scott Barlow's upside is higher. But hey, Enyel De Los Santos is a pretty serviceable player. He's been making some really quality AJ Preller cost-cutting moves. We have a lot of issues with him. I have an issue with all the reports and the micromanaging and all that stuff. But in terms of trades, he's not the worst in the world, man. So AJ Preller, look, he's a guy. I'm going to end with this. How many times have the Padres been since he took over in a situation where you were like, oh my God, they messed it up? Back with the Matt Kemp era, right? And Justin Upton and all those guys. Oh my God, they gave up Trey Turner for Will Myers. You don't recover from that. And then they did. You get Tatis in the James Shields trade. Oh my God, they did Eric Hosmer. It's a disaster. Well, they get Manny Machado. Oh, the season was a mess and you spent all that money. Well, then 2020 happened, right? And then 2021 happened, unfortunately. And then you give up all that stuff for Blake Snell and Yu Darvish, and it's like, well, they got Juan Soto still. And then they got rid of Juan Soto, but they have a good farm system again. So again, it's really stinky. In a vacuum, I think that's a solid move. I'm upset that the Padres were in this situation to begin with. I'm going to miss him. And I want to also end with, there are going to be so many people in baseball media. It's already happening. Tom Verducci of Sports Illustrated writing an article about this too, how the great era of expectations is over in San Diego. It's not. It's not. Don't listen to that nonsense. The Padres still have the stars. My voice, my proclamations on this podcast has never been, you have to have 9 all-star players. My proclamation on this podcast is that you have to have some star players, and Padres have some star players, and they've shown a willingness to go the extra mile and get you that player, instead of doing all this little wishy-washy nonsense that may get you an ALCS berth. It might even do that. Might get you a couple playoff wins, but doesn't get you to the World Series. You know how I know that? Because the Guardians, Rays, Brewers, and many more, Oakland A's, right, have been doing that for years, and everyone they love applauding them. They love it. You're going to get a lot of media people talking about, see, this is why you can't just spend money. And they will ignore the fact that every team that wins the World Series outside that Royals team is a team that either spends a lot more money, or they spend on a couple stars to help get them over the hump. So do not listen to those people. We literally just saw the Texas Rangers win after being one of the worst teams in baseball, and everyone ridiculed them for their spending. And guess what happened? They won the World Series, and who was a really big key factor in all that? John Gray was pretty good, right? Yeah, he was pretty good for them. Jordan Montgomery, yeah, they made a big trade at the deadline to get him there. Oh, and Marcus Semien and Corey Seager were pretty good too, weren't they? Huh. Interesting. So do not listen to those people. They are billionaire apologists sometimes, whether indirectly or directly. Maybe they don't realize it. Don't listen to that. This is the one sport where you will get a lot of people talking about how you should be happy and praising teams for just winning, but not winning the actual championship. It's like the bar for them is right here, but it should be all the way up here. It's the only sport like that. When the Milwaukee Bucks, if they make the Eastern Conference Finals, people don't go, oh, well, they made the Eastern Conference Finals. That's great. Oh, the Warriors, they made the Western Conference Finals. Oh, LeBron, he was 2 games away. This is great. No, it's about winning the whole thing. And for some reason, baseball people don't always abide by that. It's weird. It's very weird. But I genuinely think the Padres are in a better position than a lot of other teams. Sure, the Orioles are better on paper, but the Orioles have shown that they don't want to spend. They don't want to make the big moves. So until proven otherwise, I will take the Padres and their weird salaries and their messy payroll any day of the week, because it shows that they try and they care. And that's why you should care about them too. Wow. It's kind of a bar at the end there. What do you guys think? I think I did all right there. But everybody, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at LO_Padres. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to be talking about some Probably. We're going to be talking about some under-the-radar free agents, maybe some outfielders that the Padres could potentially be targeting that don't cost too much and aren't the frontline guys. Not going to be talking about Jung Ho Lee again, although I'm telling you, keep an eye on him. He could be really fun. We've had good luck with a KBO prospect recently, Ha-Sung Kim. He's great. So keep an eye on that. And then next week, probably going to be doing a crossover with Locked On Yankees, talking about this trade even more, and just recapping all sorts of crazy stuff. The Diamondbacks just got Eduardo Rodriguez. Crazy stuff is happening. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy it, because this ain't the end. I promise you, this isn't the end. And until next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.